everyone, welcome back to another episode of DeLoreanTECH Live. So we've got a few things to cover, but first of all, happy holidays. I hope everyone has had an awesome holiday season and looking forward to the new year, 2025. So 3 things we're going to cover today. Well, 4 if you count. Bring a Trailer has 2 DeLoreans up for auction right now. One ends in about 24 minutes. Currently sitting at $34,250, and we've got another one. Let's go ahead and hit the back button here, and I'll show you what that one looks like. That's a 2,400 mile 83 5-speed. That one's got no reserve, so I'm wondering where that one is going to land. So it's currently at $50,000, and it ends tomorrow. Now, I don't know if I'll be able to live stream it if I've got some time. So that will end tomorrow at 12:20 p.m. So if I got some time, I'll probably live stream this one. Maybe just do a quick live stream on this one here. This looks pretty good, this 83 with only 2,400 miles. But let's talk more about the auction that ends here at about 24 minutes, 23 minutes, 42 seconds left. So I got a comment about this one because we already live streamed this one. Okay, so this was the one we did, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. Apparently the deal fell through and the seller had to relist it. And I was reading some of the comments just to figure out what happened because, you know, one of the reasons why we do this live stream is to help prospective buyers of DeLoreans and what to look for and maybe guide them through the process, help in any way we can, right? So looking at this and looking at the comments, you know, this is that one that had the seat covers. This was just a few weeks ago. Kind of a roughish engine compartment here. And it was just one of those things where it's a he said, she said kind of thing. The seller is saying that the buyer or the winner of the auction got a bit uncomfortable and wasn't willing to go through with the deal. The winner or the buyer was saying that the seller was having him wire the funds to someone else and not the seller. So there's, you know, it's kind of hard to tell really what happened. I don't know that, you know, either one of them are being honest, but, you know, deals fall through. It happens. I've, you know, had last year there was a car, not a DeLorean, another car that I was looking at. I was actually bidding on it and you know, did a little side deal after the auction was over. I didn't win the auction, but the seller actually contacted me, reached out, because I had actually gone and seen the car. I met the seller in person, and I was bidding on the auction here and Bring a Trailer. After the auction was over, I didn't win, and I didn't win on purpose because I knew what was going on. I knew that someone was shilling that auction. So I decided, you know what, this isn't what I do. Seller got back to me really quick and said, hey, you know, deal didn't go through, you interested? And we kind of made a deal, a tentative deal, and eventually I pulled out. I didn't feel comfortable because I did some more research. I looked at the Carfax. I started calling around some of the places that this car had been to and found out the seller just wasn't being honest with me. Okay, and you know, and I don't have the proof that he was shilling his own auction, but the shill bidder was a little too suspicious. Brand new account, so a lot of red flags. Brand new account, only bidding on that car. It was a little too obvious to me. All right, so you know, I actually posted a comment here on this 81 DeLorean that was deleted by Bring a Trailer, and I was just kind of giving some advice. You know, you got to be careful. It doesn't matter if the seller is, you know, complimenting Bring a Trailer and Bring a Trailer's great and hyping up Bring a Trailer, and that's what the seller is kind of doing here. You know, nothing on the seller. Maybe it's, you know, merely did fall apart and really it's nobody to blame, but you know, it's just one of those things that happens. But I posted a comment here. Bring a Trailer deleted my comment. I kind of just talked about what I just talked about with my experience on Bring a Trailer, but also my experience buying my DeLorean too, which was not on Bring a Trailer. I don't even know if Bring a Trailer was around when I bought my car. But, you know, I bought it like 6.5 years ago, and I originally found it on eBay, actually. So it was technically an auction site. It didn't bid on it. What I did was I called the person listing it, who wasn't the owner, he was doing the owners a favor by listing the car on eBay. They were the original owners. They were in their 70s. They weren't as tech savvy, or maybe they didn't feel comfortable listing it themselves and handling it themselves. So they had a friend in the car community who put the car up there for them, was helping him out. I reached out to that guy, got the phone number. Actually, I gave him my phone number, and he gave my phone number to the seller, the owner, and he called me, and we talked about it and arranged to come down and take a look the next day. So the auction had a few more days left. I wanted to look at this car. It was, exactly everything I wanted. It was an 83 gray interior manual. That's what I was looking for, right? Didn't care about the miles. In fact, the more miles, the better for me. Speaking of Miles, I've been trying to reach Chris Miles here for this one, but he may be a little bit busy, so hopefully he'll get back to us so he can join us on this 81 relisted car, which is 18 minutes left. So you can see some of the comments here. The seller was sort of defending his position. The buyer, the previous auction, was defending his position. The buyer, the winner of the auction from last time, a few weeks ago, was saying that the seller was having him wire the funds to someone other than himself. So to not to the seller. So that's a red flag to me. And I mentioned that in my comment. Bring a Trailer saw fit to not post my comment. Normally, though, what I've kind of seen, and I've been on Bring a Trailer for years now, bought a car on Bring a Trailer this year. So I have some experience. I don't buy on a regular basis, but I went through the process. Very familiar with the process. Normally, it's the seller that pulls some shenanigans, like shill bidding on their own auctions, getting another person to drive up the auction, right? Things like that. You see that, right? But it's very easy to tell if that's happening. Once in a while, it can be kind of difficult, but with the profiles, a major red flag is the seller, like this seller here. He doesn't have a whole lot here. He's been a member since 2024. He's got, I guess, 2 listings, right? He listed the same car twice. It sold for $43,000, and that was December 1st, right? A few weeks ago. And then he's got it listed here again, and it's at $34,250. Okay. So the seller, actually the buyer got a pretty good deal. I remember that one, $43,000 for an 81 DeLorean. A little rough here and there, but 43 is pretty good. You got to admit, for whatever reason, the seller is saying the buyer got cold feet and started questioning stuff and decided to pull out of the sale, all that kind of, didn't complete the sale. Now, when a buyer or the winner of the auction here on Bring a Trailer doesn't complete the sale, Bring a Trailer will still charge them their fee. The sellers don't get hit with these big fees. They just get hit with listing fees, which are pretty nominal. The winners of the auctions are the one who have to pay like a lot. I think it's like 5% or something like that. At least that's what I remember paying. It was a lot of money. So you have to factor that into your ultimate price here, right? On Bring a Trailer, you have to factor that in. Bidder on this one, who seems like he's very interested. He actually is planning on physically coming to California to make the sale in person, which I highly recommend doing. And that's what I posted in my comment, was my experience buying my DeLorean. I did it in person. I met the seller, the owner, who happened to be the original owner of the car. Met out there. It was a local owner, and met him out there. Made the deal in person. Went to the bank. Paid cash for the car. This is back when the cars weren't that much. 6 years ago, right? So I paid $28,250 for my DeLorean, and I got no problem, publicly stating that, right? Because, there's some history on this car. Obviously, it wasn't purchased through eBay. It was listed on eBay. I sort of intercepted the sale, and they pulled the auction down once the seller agreed to the deal, right? So we haggled a little bit. There was a dent on the car, which is still on the car. We haggled a little bit on that, and I was able to bring it down to $28,250. Obviously, those days are long gone, right? Those days are long gone. Although 43 for this car, I gotta admit, wasn't really, I don't know, it wasn't really that bad. You know, if this were the car I was looking for and it was 43, that would have been a great deal. So I'm looking for a black interior, automatic, early VIN 81 with a gas flap. That'd be great. I'd settle for a later VIN 81, but it's got to be an automatic and it's got to be a black interior. So the complete opposite of the car, my other car, which is, 83 gray interior manual. Now we're at 34.5. I'm going to be surprised if this one surpasses 43, right? And because there's a lot of discussion on this car here in the comments, and you can tell that people are not comfortable with what's going on here, and really with the seller, right? The seller's been very active in the comments, offering to answer questions, contact me, even contact someone in California to have them come look at the car and even buy the car. So he's willing to go above and beyond. So there's that, right? But I get it, right? I went through something on Bring a Trailer last year where ultimately I pulled out of the deal. It was not a sale through Bring a Trailer, but the car was on Bring a Trailer and I had bid on it. Obviously, it did not go through. There was sort of an after-the-fact deal made on that, and it wasn't a final deal. It was more of a tentative. I did some research, decided that I just wasn't comfortable with what was going on there. I wasn't comfortable with what the seller was telling me about the car. I feel like the seller wasn't being honest. So those kind of red flags. If trust your gut instinct. If it doesn't smell right, pull out. Right. The second car and it can go on here and find out what so it's an Audi R8 that I was bidding on. Ultimately, I did find a good deal on an R8, right, earlier this year. And that transaction on Bring a Trailer went perfect. It was perfect. I got a great deal on the car. It was a newer year. It was everything I wanted, right? So it was a 2015. It had the facelift, all that good stuff. Very happy. So things can go south on Bring a Trailer, and things can go well on Bring a Trailer. It all depends on a couple things. Number one, the seller, the honesty, all sorts of stuff. The type of car you're looking for. Maybe the proximity of the car. That car was a local car. I was able to go out, check it out, test drive it before I started bidding on it. And the seller was great, and everything went well. So he's got a driving video, so we've seen this driving video. I think this is the same driving video that he posted before. It's only 10 seconds long. Not long enough for me, but hey, at least he's got something, right? And we can tell that this is, in fact, the car. And, he's got, a couple other videos here of the car as well. Opening the door. Let's see what we got going on in the chat here. All right, so we got Big Sarge. Hey, Big Sarge, how's it going, man? And we got Tistan. Hey, happy holidays. How you guys doing? So the other thing we want to talk about is Back to the Future, the musical. So I went to go see it, actually, and it was pretty good. I thought it was really good, and I was really impressed with what they did with the DeLorean. So we are going to talk a little bit about the DeLorean. I thought, when I went to go see the show, I thought they were actually using a real DeLorean, but as you can tell, it's a bit of a prop. It's a bit of a prop replica DeLorean. They did a pretty good job making it. Now, they had to make it light because of what they did in the show. When we start talking about my review of the musical later on after the auction, I am going to spoil it, okay? So I will let you know when I start talking about it in case you're interested in going to see the show. I'm going to let you know what I thought about it, but also I'm going to talk about the differences between the musical and the movie, right? And I'm going to try to keep it DeLorean focused, but I'll talk about some other story elements as well that I thought were kind of interesting, maybe some a little bit improved and some that I maybe didn't agree with. So we'll go into that. I'll let you know before I unleash the spoilers, talking about Back to the Future, the musical. And then we'll talk about the TOMY once again. So the TOMY is crushing it out there. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the pricing here on eBay on the secondary market. It's kind of crazy, right? So $600, $700 for this thing that originally was only $300. So anyway, we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll go into some of the details as far as some of the actual sales to get an idea of what you can expect to pay for this thing. I've been getting a lot of emails and comments from folks out there from some of the previous videos, especially that one video where I was shipping the DeLoreans to Europe, right? These Back to the Future TOMY DeLoreans. I guess folks thought that I had them for sale, that I had some in stock. Nope. I was just trying to help out fellow DeLorean fans who live in Europe, get these because TOMY was not shipping these internationally. I don't even think you could have these shipped to Canada or like Mexico or anywhere besides the US. So Europe, anywhere out there, Asia, you could not get that. Although TOMY, Takara TOMY, I believe, is releasing a version of this. I don't know if it's exactly the same. I'm assuming it's pretty much the same. Maybe there's a different box. I don't know. In Japan. So as you know, TOMY is a Japanese company, and they are releasing their version of it, whatever that will look like. I don't think it's actually been released yet in Japan. TOMY's a Japanese company. Takara TOMY is the parent company. They have the rights to release that in Japan. When it comes to Takara TOMY, they have different licenses. So, for example, they have the license to release the Transformers, but only in Japan. Hasbro has the global license minus Japan. So, TOMY may come out with their own version of this. We don't know what that looks like. We do know that eBay has some listings that are from Japan for the Takara TOMY version, but it's just stock photos, right? So getting back to this auction, we're at 35,250. You got 7 minutes left. Again, I'm not expecting this one to go through the roof unless the seller and the buyer, well, unless the buyer was local and had gone out to maybe meet the seller. But on Bring a Trailer, that's a very uncommon thing. A lot of the time, it's the buyer and seller not even in the same state, right? I was lucky enough to where the two auctions that I participated in sort of recently, not that recently, about a year, less than a year ago, both sellers were local to me. One was in the same city as me. The other one was just down south a little bit. So there's that, right? And I get it. It's not easy to have that situation. That's the ideal situation. So what happens when you're not in the same state? You got to be very careful. And that's what I believed happened on the previous auction for this car, this 81, VIN number 7022, a very late VIN 81. I believe it's a November car, if I'm not mistaken. I guess we can check that out really quick here. I think he's got a photo of the VIN plate. November build 81. And there it is. Yeah, it's a November 81 build, 7022. So, you know, it had a little bit of the engine compartment looked a little rough. You know, he changed the fuel lines out, which I thought was pretty good. He could have cleaned up. There's a lot of dirt and stuff like that. He could have cleaned it up. It could have been that the car was stored outside for a while. You know, with these cars, that's not uncommon. And a lot of times, you know, the current owner doesn't know if it was or for how long. The history is, you know, kind of fragmented on a lot of these cars. Unless you're buying from the original owner on these things, it's kind of hard to tell sometimes. So anyway, let's see what else we got going on here. So 35.5 ends in about 5 minutes. So we'll go through this one. We'll talk a little bit about this other car here. Actually, that's the same one, but let's go back to the 83, the 2,400 mile DeLorean that's up right now. That's at 50,000. So that one is gonna probably go through the roof. And when I say the roof, I kind of mean if you look at where the sales have been, right? So let's take a look at that really fast here so you can kind of get an idea of what we're talking about. Now, let's see if we can see the sales here. I wish they'd throw that chart up. They had a really cool chart. It's usually, if you click on something, it'll pop up. But you can see what's going on here. The last couple days ago, you had one sell for 67,000. So 48,000 on the lower end. 67, I would say, is kind of on the mid to high range. We had a few record breakers this year on really low mile cars, and I would argue that this 81 2300 or 2400 mile car is definitely a low miles car when it's all said and done. You have the car that we're looking at today, which was just 3 cars ago, that only took 43. So not a whole lot there, right? And then another one just before that, 63. So $20,000 difference on these 281s that arguably look very similar. Obviously, this one's a lot cleaner, probably less miles. The miles on this car right now is, I believe it's only 22,000 miles on this 81 that we're looking at here. Yeah, no, it's actually 28,000 miles. Okay. 28,000 miles, and when you look at the car that sold right before that one, we'll take a look at that one right now. That one only had, well, 12,000. So a little less than half what the other car had. A little cleaner maybe, but look at these taillights. They're faded. That tells you that this car sat for a while outdoors. Okay, but it is a early VIN 81. So does it have the gas flap? It has the gas flap. So there's that, right? It's got the darker wheels. So those tend to command a little bit more when it comes to DeLorean auctions, mainly because they're just, for collectors, they're just, the sought after car. Now, I would like to get one, an automatic black interior. That'd be really cool with the gas flap and the dark wheels. So as different as possible from what I already have. Now that's, I'm not actively really looking for it, but it is something on the list, right? That way we can do more videos on automatics for the channel. So we have a few videos, but not quite enough, especially dealing with the automatic transmission. That would be pretty cool, and the computer governor and all that kind of stuff. We don't really have any videos on that. It would be nice to have that. So you can see some of the other history prior to that. You've got some that didn't hit reserve, 56, 47, 55, 69. Okay, you got a record breaker here, 3,400, 113, right? So that beat the Johnny Carson. I think there was another one before that that took 151. So that destroyed the Johnny Carson. This also was higher than the Johnny Carson, right? 111. So you had 111, 151, and 113. What do these have in common? Very low miles, 3,400. So the one we have ending tomorrow has only 2,400 miles, okay? So we're currently at 36,000 for this 81 with 28,000 miles on it. And you've got 2 minutes left. So we're in the final minutes of bidding here. Man, 36. Imagine if this car sold for less than 40. I might bid on it myself. I mean, why not, right? And it's local. The guy's in California. I didn't go out and check it out. I'm not really looking for a manual. Actually, this is an automatic. I'm looking for an early VIN automatic with a black interior. So this is an automatic. It might, for the right price, why not? I can, go without the black interior and the early VIN, non-gas flap, all that kind of stuff to get that automatic, right? And it's, it's not a bad looking car. I mean, it needs a little bit of work here and there, right? And that might be like 50,000. I don't know, right? At least $10,000 worth of work on this thing. I don't know. I don't know what you guys think out there, but it's gonna be a bit of work. The dash has got some issues, right? And that knee pad. The knee pad can be replaced, right? I don't know if the rest of the dash looks as bad as that. But whoever gets this car, and you got 40, oh man, this is, you got 40 seconds left, and this thing's only at 36.5. Wow. So I'm logged in. Let's see if I put 37 on this thing, what happens. I mean, why not, right? 37 is pretty cheap for this DeLorean. 36.5, I don't know. I wasn't really planning on bidding on a car, but, it's pretty cheap. Oh, 36,750. So you do have a little bit of a bidding war going on here. You have Borovkov USA bidding on it. You've got Only bidding on it. You have Us8. So Us8 has been very active in the comments. This guy really wants the car. And so you have OG73, he's bidding on it. Headerly's bidding on it. So you have a few bidders on it. I would be very surprised if this car goes for less than 40. I'd be tempted to bid on it myself. But it looks like we have a healthy supply of bidders on this car right now that are probably not going to allow that to happen, right? So 40, it seems to be sort of the threshold, the low end of the threshold on DeLoreans. It's very rare that you see one that is a driving car, and this is a driving car, according to the videos, go for less than 40,000. You just don't see that. And with about 4 or so bidders on this one, it's not likely to happen. So you got the seller sitting there like this, like, come on. I made an effort to dispute that Carfax report. So apparently there's something with the Carfax on this one. This is a 40-plus-year-old car. There's a lot of stuff that probably should be on the Carfax that isn't, right? It is what it is. And you're not going to know because Carfax didn't exist when this car came out and for the longest time after the car came out. So it's just, this car's sat unregistered for long stretches of time and you don't know what happened during that period of time. Maybe they were sitting in a barn. Maybe they were outside somewhere in a field. We don't even know, right? Maybe they were stored indoors and maintained meticulously by the original owner, like my car was, right? You have those examples and you have the big question mark examples too, and everything in between. So that's one of the reasons why we do these live streams, is to help sort of decipher what's going on with some of these cars. We speculate where the car was, what condition it was in at various points in time, how well it was maintained, and what you can tell just by the photos and things like that, right? So we looked at tons of DeLoreans throughout the years, over and over and over again. So you start to look at things and start to notice things, and you're able to sort of extrapolate things about the car, what had happened with the car, how it was stored, how it was maintained. Was it stored outside? Was it stored inside? That kind of thing, right? And you take that and you look at the Carfax, what little information there typically is on the Carfax report, the videos that they hopefully will publish on this, as well as the photos. If they have any documentation on the car, then you can start piecing it all together, and then you can make an informed decision versus just like crossing your fingers, pressing that button, and hoping that the car will come as shown on the auction. And as we've seen in prior live streams on Bring a Trailer auctions, there's been some surprises. So, dang, we got less than 10 seconds and this thing's at $38,000. Oh, come on. 38? You've got to be kidding me. This thing sold for less than 40. Oh, current bid, 38. Winning bid, sold for less than 40. I can't believe it. Well, I missed my chance, and that's okay. Let's see who won it. I mean, that has got to be a record low for DeLorean. That's got to be a record low. $38,000. He won it, and he also won John Cena's Jaguar. $160,000. So this guy has bid on some stuff. He bid on the 3,400 mile DeLorean as well earlier this year in May, and he's bid on a few other things here, but not crazy stuff here. This is a kind of a cool looking Jag. That's pretty neat. 160,000 is the winner of that. And he just scored a DeLorean. He just stole a DeLorean, an 81, driving car for $38,000. $38,000. Now, I was tempted to put my own bid on this, but the reality is that, maybe part of me wanted to hold out for that early VIN black interior. But 38 is cheap. 38 is cheap. You just don't see that. I remember when I was looking for my car, I went to go see an 81 locally, and they wanted 38. And this was back in 2018. 2018, they were asking 38 for the DeLorean. And here we are, 28,000 miles, driving car just got stolen for $38,000. Now, why did this happen? That's the question, okay? And if you look at the comments, you can kind of see. Amazed. that this driving car got stolen. I mean, it literally got stolen. For less than $40K. But not too amazed. Auction history. Now, you know, that could have put a lot of potential bidders off, because there was discussion in the comments about, well, the seller did this and the buyer didn't do that and this and that, got cold feet, or I felt like something was fishy, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. People reading this, you know, Bring a Trailer left the comments there, and that sort of worked against the auction, I think. It worked against the seller in this case. You know, people, that turns people off, right? And if I were out of state, which I'm not out of state on this one, this is actually probably an hour from me, this car. Maybe less. Maybe 45 minutes away. Okay? If I were out of state, though, I'd be a little hesitant to bid on this given what had happened earlier this month with this car. Okay? It was local, and I had gone out to check it out, met the guy, which I didn't. You know, it's the holidays, didn't have any time, wasn't really thinking about it, looked at this one, commented on it, wasn't too like interested, but I mean, it sold for less than 40. That's ridiculous. That's unheard of today. But yeah, not too amazed. Shoot, it did go for sub 40. I thought it might be the one to do so, but I was all tapped out at 36K. Gotta wait for my upcoming annual bonus to go higher on the next one. Yeah, a lot of sun damage, so there's that. I mean, it's going to be some work, right? But sub 40, a sub 40 car, that's like almost unheard of. And it doesn't look like the seller's very happy, so there's no reserve. Or maybe there was, and it was like maybe 35 or something like that. The seller doesn't appear to be too enthusiastic about letting that car get stolen for $38,000. I wonder how many others are out there kind of kicking themselves. Imagine, so this car, the transaction goes well, and this guy Borovkov USA becomes a proud new owner of a nice driving DeLorean for only $38,000. Imagine how many guys out there are kicking themselves for not bidding on it. I feel like I should have put something down on this thing for 38, right? Even the time machine builders could have picked this thing up cheap and converted it to a time machine. I mean, $38,000 for a DeLorean, you put some work into it, you know, like Danny Botkin or Video Bob, right? Easily pick this car up, convert it to a time machine, and, you know, that just means a little bit more profit, maybe a lot more profit, right? I think a time machine conversion, I keep hearing like $100,000 for something like that, right? And they want, like, for a completed car, close to 200, right? So there's a lot of room there for some additional profit when you bring in a car like this. It's a driving car. Oh yeah, there was that odometer rollover thing. That's really a non-issue to me. Man, I'm wondering what the seller is thinking right now. This seems to be across the board. A lot of cars are selling for significantly less than their peak market turning. I don't know about that, guys. Market turning. Nope. Take a look at the concurrent DeLorean auction. So that one's still sitting at 50,000. Currently at 50,000. I mean, it sold for 43 before, and it's $5,000 less than what it sold for before that, right? Now, with the fees and everything, it's going to push it over 40, obviously, right? So I don't think the market's turning. It might be soft. It's, it's the best time to buy a car is in December of every year, right? So there's that. And this particular car, there's some strikes against this car and against the seller a little bit too, because of the comments that were being made. And people just aren't comfortable. So there's a lot of stuff working against this. If it were me, I would not have relisted the car that quickly. I would have waited. He relisted it in the same month. I would have let it sit for a bit and let the dust settle. Bring a trailer, put another car up. After the seller listed this one, they put another car up, I think the next day, right? And a better car, a lower mile car, gas flap hood. It's that 81 right here, the 2,400 mile car, $50,000 currently, right? And you're going to see that one go up into the 60s. It might even go up into the 70s and 80s because of the mileage, right? So is the market turning? I don't think it's turning. I feel like it may be a little soft, and this isn't exactly the best example car, but it's a driving car that took less than $40,000. That's pretty surprising, right? If this car did not go through what it had gone through here on Bring a Trailer, it definitely would have gotten at least what it sold for prior to, if not more. But again, that's just sort of my theory on that. All right, let's jump over to Back to the Future, the musical. So we're gonna take a look at this DeLorean here. So I want to talk about the Back to the Future DeLorean, and we are going to get into spoilers, okay? Because I'm going to give you sort of my review of Back to the Future, the musical, and kind of what I thought about it, right? So I did see it on December 26th. We did a full DeLorean presentation at the Segerstrom in Costa Mesa. Very awesome venue. Really had a great time. A lot of other DeLorean owners like Edwin Pineda showed up with his time machine. We did a video on that. Took a lot of photos. Met a lot of folks out there. We even got a newspaper article in the LA Times. That was pretty cool. And so I'm gonna try to see if I can pull that up as well. And yeah, that was very awesome. So let's talk about the Back to the Future, the musical DeLorean. And before I do that, though, I wanted to pull up the event article in the LA Times that Edwin sent me yesterday. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And a lot of photos of the cars outside. And it really was a cool event. I mean, it was ideal. I mean, if you're a DeLorean owner and you like, bringing your car out to events like I do and like a lot of us do, that was the event to do it at. That was just so cool. And you had so many enthusiastic Back to the Future fans out there and DeLorean fans. And it was so great, showing our cars off, letting everybody take photos with them. I'm not... I'm fine with people sitting in my car if they ask. I'm usually okay with that. Most owners are kind of like, well, no. And so they had security out there, which was great. The Segerstrom did an amazing job accommodating us DeLorean owners out there, and really, really thought it was an awesome event. And so anyway, let's take a look at that. I'm gonna see if I can pull up this newspaper article here and show you guys. And we can talk about the DeLorean. We can talk about, my review of and I'm going to do some spoilers here. Okay, so we're going to do some spoilers. And I want to make sure everybody's comfortable with that. So I'm going to point out the differences between this and the movie, which, there's quite a few. Obviously, it's a musical. So, you've just got that going for it. But the storyline, too, they changed a lot of story elements when it came to Back to the Future, the musical, comparing that to the 1985 original movie, right? And trying to get that article up here, got to jump through a bunch of hoops, and oh, come on, let's see what we got here. Everybody's talking about the $38,000 car. It's amazing that it actually sold for that much. 38,000 is like ridiculous, guys. It is ridiculous for this car. I know at least one guy who is probably kicking himself right now for not buying the car, right? Not getting this car, and for $38,000. But anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about Back to the Future, the musical. And here's the Daily Pilot LA Times OC article on the DeLorean event. It was very cool. So here's a photo right here of Edwin Pineda's time machine. So Edwin Pineda made his grand entrance. We did a video on that one. It was really cool. And yeah, that was just awesome. So we parked the cars right out in the front. They had the Times kind of show up and take photos and write an article here talking about all sorts of stuff here. So they interviewed Edwin, who is one of my favorite DeLorean time machine owners and a really good friend. Him and his wife Rosa were out there. It's always great to meet up with them at DeLorean events. They're a really awesome couple, and I feel very lucky to call Edwin and Rosa friends of mine. And so here's a shot of the time circuits display. You can tell he had Michael Chaffee sign off on it, and Michael gave him his opinion. What a beautiful car. We did a video as well out there, a comparison of the TOMY Back to the Future 1/10 scale DeLorean against Edwin's very accurate time machine. Now, not DeLorean accurate when it comes to the DeLorean used in the movie. So Edwin has an early VIN, automatic, black interior. The same car I'm looking for, right? He's got it. And he had that converted to a DeLorean time machine. And he also had, so you can see this right here, the shift knob in it. He converted the automatic shifter to a manual looking shifter. So that was pretty cool. A few other guys have done that just to make their car look a little bit more like the movie car. And here's a shot of all three. Well, there's 5 cars total. You can kind of see the DeLoreanTECH car right here, but this is Richard McMillan's car right here, and this is David Daniels' car as well. So they made it out. Their DeLoreans made it out, and there was another car at the end. There was a new owner, or a newish owner. His name is Tim Guest. He's a pretty cool guy from Redondo Beach. So all 5 of us were out there with our cars. Richard and David had their cars out there for the matinee, and then the 3 other DeLoreans, we showed up probably around 3:30 for the evening performance. So there's us with the DeLoreanTECH car. I think I was opening up the hood or something on ours, and you can see the other DeLorean owned by Tim Guest out here. That's a pretty cool, very original car that he picked up from DeLorean Motor Company, Florida, about 2 years ago. So amazing interior on this car. Looks brand new. So very impressive 81 that he brought out. And so here we are, members of the Southern California DeLorean Club parked their cars for opening night. Back to the Future, the musical. It was very cool. It was, so at the end of the show, okay, this show was so cool. The ending, I mean, you were pumped at the end of Back to the Future, the musical. I felt like, wow, man, they did such a great job with the DeLorean in there. Now, again, it wasn't an actual DeLorean, but which makes sense. It had to be a prop because of some of the stuff that they did. And again, spoiler alert, I'm going to spoil what happens in the musical and the storyline differences. I'm going to spoil some stuff about the DeLorean, all that kind of stuff. So if you're squeamish about that, you can tune out. But we'll quickly go through the rest of this article here. So here's a shot of the DeLoreanTECH car. And so we had the hoverboard out. We had, the Nike mags. I got the time circuits out there as well. I had the Speedo. You can't really see it. But, the props and stuff that we usually put out for the Back to the Future fans. Obviously, our car is a stock DeLorean. But, we got some Back to the Future flair thrown in. So we got the not the Mr. Fusion, the flux capacitor. I have a Mr. Fusion. I don't normally bring it out because I don't really have any place to put it. But I have my own Mr. Fusion. We also have the SID. Those are installed full time in the car. The rest of the stuff I just kind of keep in the trunk in the front. and I bring that stuff out, like the time circuits display and the speedo. I bring that stuff out for display purposes. You know, the shoes. The hoverboard is usually stowed here between the seat and the door sill. And I installed a stainless steel bulkhead in the back to sort of simulate the bulkhead that Doc Brown installed in the rear of the DeLorean, the rear panel or the rear compartment here on the DeLorean. And you know, we got the piping here. So obviously my I keep saying Mr. Fusion. My flux capacitor is very flush in the back here, and I needed to do that so I can free up some room here so I can store stuff, right? So I wouldn't have been able to take those Tomys to the post office if I had the flux capacitor installed like I had it before, which is sort of out here. It doesn't fit underneath this rear shelf right here unless you do some extensive modifications to it, and I was able to do that. We have a video on how to do that, so you can check that out. It's called the flush capacitor. So it's installed flush in the back. I got that idea from Ernest Klein. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat if you guys want to check this article out. Check it out and let me know what you guys think. You know, so it was covered by the LA Times. You know, I'm not a big newspaper guy, but the LA Times is a, why can't I, oh, interesting. So for some reason, it's not letting me post that comment in the chat. Oh, well, it is what it is. I guess the comment's too long. I can't change the settings on this thing here. All right, oh, well, so much for that. How else can I get that link out there? I can just put it in the video and you guys can take a look at it later. I actually blasted this article out there. So it's on our Facebook, it's on Instagram, it's on YouTube. Like in the, if you go to the community tab on our channel, you can check it out there as well. I think I tweeted it out on X, right, to Elon, saying, hey, Elon, take a look, right? Anyway, so you know what, this event was so cool. I brought the Tomy out. I was walking the Tomy around and people were just gawking at it like, wow, how do I get that? And just, you know, we did the whole video on the Tomy versus Edwin's DeLorean time machine. And, you know, what I was going to say is at the end of the show, you were so pumped, especially for the DeLorean, that people were just swarming these cars. And it was probably like 10:30 at night. You know, we had the lighting all up and it was just great, right? So a lot of enthusiastic fans of the movie and the car were just bombarding the DeLoreans, and it was great. It was a really awesome experience. I love showing the car off to those who appreciate the car. It really is one of those things that needs to be appreciated. You know, it appeals to everyone. This car appeals to everyone, and it always brings a smile to everyone's face when you bring your car and display it out there. And you know, I not everybody does it, but I let people sit in the car. I'm okay with that. Once in a while you'll get offers. I got an offer on the car that night by, I don't know if the guy was serious, but my car is not for sale, and it would take a lot for me to sell my DeLorean. So I sent him over to Edwin. I said, hey, there's a guy out there with a DeLorean time machine conversion. Why don't you talk to him, you know? But anyway, that happens once in a while. You got guys out there. And I told him, I'm like, oh, look, you know, you're just going to overpay if you buy my car. But there's cars every week on Bring a Trailer. You can just go on the auction site, bid on a car, and get one cheap, $38,000. That's probably several times less than what I would sell my car for if I would ever sell my car, which I won't, right? Now, everybody has their price, but, you know, who's going to pay $1 million for a DeLorean? Anyway. Alrighty. So, kudos to the Segerstrom. Kudos to Bob Gale, who was there as well. So he was there earlier. I didn't get a chance to talk to him, but Richard and Edwin, I believe, got a chance to talk to him, if I'm not mistaken. I know Richard did. And they got photos with Bob. I didn't see Bob. He was there. He was out there as well, so that was really cool. And so kudos to Bob Gale. Did an amazing job on this. I mean, just you can tell Bob was involved. You know, throughout the entire musical, you could tell that Bob was heavily involved in this. Now, will he do a second one, right? And he's saying, at least Richard, who spoke to him, said it's probably not going to happen. There's a lot of work that went into this. Remember when George Lucas made the first Star Wars? It practically killed him, that kind of thing. He did end up making sequels and stuff like that. But I feel like the musical was a very, very difficult endeavor to take on. So we're probably not going to see a part 2. It would be cool, right? So again, we're going to do some spoilers on this. We're going to talk about the DeLorean. And let me get this link. And I wonder if I can just share this on the chat, because I copied a lot here. Let's do this. Close that out. And so the DeLorean that is featured, and let's go back to this shot right here, that is featured in the musical is not an actual DeLorean. I thought it was. I mean, I didn't do a lot of research on the show. I didn't want to spoil it for myself, but here I am going to spoil it for everybody else out there. So again, spoiler alert. You know, there's a lot of stuff out there already on this show. There's probably like reviews and there's probably comparisons. I didn't read any of that. I didn't want to know, right, anything about the musical before going out to check it out. But I was impressed with this prop replica DeLorean. Now, you could tell right away, if you're a DeLorean owner, this is clearly not an actual DeLorean, but they did a pretty good job recreating it, right? And obviously, when it first appears in the musical, you're like blown away. I was like, wow. I mean, this thing just shows up out of nowhere. You know, Doc Brown shows up in the car. They don't have the van, right? So in the Twin Pines Mall scene, you don't have the van. The car just kind of shows up just out of nowhere, and which is fine, right? So and that's pretty cool, right? It just shows up out of nowhere. Everybody's like, whoa. And I remember everybody was clapping. You know, the DeLorean made its grand entrance. So there was quite a few different things about the show, and we're going to go into that. And I actually had some notes here, and let's see if I can even pull that up. Yeah, so when the DeLorean first showed up, right, a big difference there. Doesn't come out of the van. The other big difference that I noticed right off the bat in the very beginning scenes, there are no Libyans. So no VW, no chase scene. You know, that's probably, I'm thinking that was more of a creative choice because back in the 80s, there was a lot of stuff going on with Libya, right? There was, you know, Ronald Reagan was the president. There was some war going on over there. I was just a kid back then, but I remember there was a lot going on there with terrorism. So they brought in the Libyans as far as, hey, the Libyans they're here in the you know, the parking lot. They're after me, that kind of stuff. That doesn't really apply today, you know, a whole lot. And then you have some stereotypes that maybe they wanted to, you know, stay away from that kind of stuff. I respect that, right? And I thought their choice in not going with that, it was appropriate. And also it made to sort of speed things up a little bit because they wanted to focus more on the musical aspect. I felt like the chase scene might have taken too long unless they made it a musical chase scene with the Libyans. I don't know. They didn't go there. And the other thing, too, that was a big difference that I don't think I agreed with it. There was no Einstein. Einstein was nowhere to be seen. He's nowhere to be seen. It was actually Doc Brown who goes back in time and instead of Einstein. So I was like, well, come on. You know, no love for Einie, unfortunately. You can kind of overlook that, but I still felt like, you know, that was a big missing element. Like just something was missing here. So the DeLorean looks pretty good. You know, they did pretty good job here. I feel like some of the parts might have been actual DeLorean parts, but you know, it's kind of hard to say. They painted it. So either they kind of created their own sort of replica. Obviously, the doors are not real doors, but they did a pretty good job with the DeLorean itself. Look at that. So let's take a look at that one more time. You can obviously tell this is not an actual DeLorean. The taillights, right, they're not even real taillights. The fascias, not the actual fascias. These letters might be actual letters, though, from, you know, the DeLorean, you know, the aftermarket stainless steel letters, right? So obviously the wheels and tires are not real. You got the Eagle GT. So they try to make, you know, this car as DeLorean looking as possible. But you can tell, like, for example, the rear wheels, which look bigger than the front, but they're not like deep dish, right? They don't look wider than the front wheels. Let's see what else here. But so and that's fine, right? It's just a prop. They still did a pretty good job. I thought they did a good job emphasizing the DeLorean aspect of the car for the audience, especially the ones sitting far away. Like, I was kind of sitting a little far away, right? We got our tickets comped because we brought the cars in, right? So we didn't get the best seats. We didn't get up front. That would have been great. It was opening night. It was sold out. It was completely sold out. Every seat in the house was taken, right? So we got nosebleeds. It was okay, though. And I thought they emphasized the stuff, especially with the taillights. They had a lot of lighting on the car, and the tires sticking out was kind of a good touch, because then you can see the tires better from a distance. So they considered that, right? And it was obvious to me that the subtle differences here in the car were chosen because they wanted to emphasize the DeLorean aspect of the car from a distance. And it worked, right? It worked. And I was very pleased with that. I was very appreciative of that. Okay? And we got Russ. Russ Law has entered the chat. How's it going, Russ? Let's see if I can copy that article in here. Yeah. So there's the article. If you want to check out the LA Times article on the Segerstrom Back to the Future fan. I think it's the Fan Future Day or something like that. So we have this video here that I just found. It's on Facebook, I think, and this is one of the actors who played Marty McFly. I don't know if this is the same guy who played Marty. There's several of them. Just like with most musicals, you have multiple actors that are portraying the characters. And let's take a look at that. So look at that clock right here. So obviously, again, you had to make some choices so that the audience can kind of see what was going on with the DeLorean. So one of the things that I pointed out here in my notes here is they were taking the flux capacitor out of the car during the performance, because you can't really see it. It's way in the back. So whenever they talked about the flux capacitor, right, they actually brought it out and they would just kind of show it, and the LEDs on that thing were like super bright. Like, I was like, wow, up in the front, whoa, you're probably being blinded by the LEDs. The LEDs on this car were extremely bright, and they would bring the flux capacitor, would take the flux capacitor out of the car and kind of show it. So there's that, things like that I think are appropriate, warranted, that kind of stuff. But I just wanted to point that out. Let's see what else here. So again, they did not have the Libyans, right, in the beginning scene here, and you can kind of see the background here. You got J.C. Penney and Spencer, right, at the Twin Pines Mall. So how does Doc Brown die in the beginning? He does not get shot by the Libyans. So what they decided to do instead was they condensed that whole sort of story element where he gets radiation poisoning. He gets exposed to the radiation because there was a defect. I think his radiation suit rips. So that was kind of a joke, but he gets, his hands start burning, right? And Marty goes back in time in order to prevent that from happening. So that's a reasonable modification, I think, to the story. And so he goes back in time to try to prevent that, but of course he doesn't have the plutonium, and that storyline is preserved, right? Where they have to use the lightning rod at the end to generate the 1.21 gigawatts of electricity. The other thing about the DeLorean that is very different is that it talks, okay? The DeLorean talks like Kit from Knight Rider, okay? But it's not as personable as Kit. I would say it's very similar to the computer in Star Trek The Next Generation. So it's kind of like that, right? It obeys your commands, and it responds in that robotic fashion. So that was, a major difference. I thought that was actually kind of cool. So, at first I was kind of like, oh, well, the DeLorean's talking, and it's talking in a woman's voice, which is kind of interesting as well. Kind of like the computer. So Majel Barrett from Star Trek The Next Generation did the voice for the computer in Star Trek The Next Generation. That's kind of why I felt like this was somewhat similar to that. So it may be a nod to that, it may not be, but it was a little bit of a nod to that, and also Kit from Knight Rider, okay? So the car responds to you, and throughout the performance, throughout the show, Marty was trying to get the DeLorean to do what he wanted it to do, but it had voice recognition, so it wouldn't recognize Marty's voice as Doc, right? Until I think at one point, I could be wrong about this, he tried to sound like Doc, and then it recognized his voice. But Marty was saying, hey, go back in time, do this, do that, and the car wouldn't respond because it's not Doc's voice. So it only respond to Doc Brown. So very different story element there, right? And but kind of interesting. It was kind of funny because they made fun of that. They had fun with that, so that was kind of cool, right? Marty was very frustrated that, hey, DeLorean, do this, hey, DeLorean, do that. DeLorean kept saying, voice not recognized, denied. So poor Marty, right? Russ is saying he saw the musical in London in 2022, so this has been going on for a couple years now. Oh, check that out. So you have this sort of makeshift. Look at that. It says EV, DMC EV. I'm assuming that's an E right there. So that's kind of interesting, right? And he does say the sucker's electric. So even though in the movie when he says this sucker's electric, he really meant the time machine aspect of it. The car itself ran on gasoline. We already knew that because of what happened in Part 2, plus it sounds like a combustion engine, all that. What he meant was the DeLorean time machine aspect is electric, and he just needed the nuclear reaction to generate the 1.21 gigawatts of electricity for the flux capacitor to go back in time. The car itself was an internal combustion engine car. Now, this one here may be an EV. So that could be something. They didn't mention it. He did say this sucker is electric, but in today's terms, when people hear this car is electric, they assume it's an EV. Okay, so I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the DeLorean in this performance of Back to the Future the musical is in fact an EV. It is not a internal combustion engine powered vehicle. Okay. So that is another difference, right? A subtle difference and sort of open to interpretation. But I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. What else here? So, let's see. Anything more with the DeLorean? So at the very end of the movie, and again, spoiler alert, and I was just waiting for it, right? I was just waiting for that DeLorean to go into hover mode. And it does, and it does not disappoint, okay? So prior to seeing it, I was like, and somebody even asked me, hey, did they use a real DeLorean in the musical? And I'm like, yeah, of course they did. I'm thinking, well, they probably did but they did a pretty good job recreating the DeLorean with this prop. Very light, obviously, because they had to suspend the car somehow. I don't know how they did that. I haven't researched that. But they used something, right? They used something. And they did a pretty good job with the hover mode at the end. Right, it definitely does not disappoint. They bring it up. I think it almost looks like they're flying. Doc and Marty are flying in space. Now, the one difference at the end is that Jennifer does not go with them in the DeLorean. So now, will they do a part 2? Probably not. It'd be cool if they did. But I gotta tell you, the DeLorean stole the show. Hey, look at the steering wheel on the DeLorean as well. Here, you can see that it is similar to that aftermarket DeLorean steering wheel. You can see the DMC is prominently displayed on it, though. So that's a custom steering wheel. Very cool. You have this digital alarm clock here instead of the brass clock. That's just you're just able to see the time a little bit better if you're in the audience. He has the SID right here as well. So a lot of the time machine componentry is accurate. You have the lightning rod attachment. Of course, you have Bob Gale, who oversaw the recreation a lot of this stuff here in the movie or in the musical. So Let's take a look a little bit more about what's going on here. So you have that phone. So we didn't have that phone in the movie, so there's a difference there. Check that out. So this is a little abbreviated. It is what it is. It is a performance. It is a replica car. So it is scaled down a little bit, but you have a lot of the stuff that made it, you know, the DeLorean time machine, like the time circuits, like the flux capacitor, all that kind of stuff. Now, the flux capacitor, you don't really see it here. You got this other thing here, but they kept taking it out and putting it back in whenever they talked about it. So I thought was pretty cool. The other differences, story differences that we have with the DeLorean. Oh wow, that looks cool. So let's go back to that shot one more time. That was kind of a quick one here. That's pretty cool looking. So I thought they did a good job. I hope they'll put this thing on display when they wrap the show up. They'll put this on display somewhere. Maybe they'll, you know, put it on display at Universal, either Hollywood or Orlando. That'd be kind of cool. I always thought it'd be cool for them to do an abbreviated version of the show at the theme park for Universal. So Universal Studios Hollywood or in Orlando. That'd be cool. They couldn't do the whole show at the theme park. It's too long. This show was like, I don't know, 2.5 hours plus. When it's all said and done, there was a 15-minute intermission. And but overall, it's like a 2.5 hour. Definitely too long for a theme park. I think if they did an abbreviated version of the show at the theme park, they really need to do that. They can bring the props there. They did a really great job with the set. I thought it was very cool. But again, the differences, right? So little differences, like no manure scene. So you don't see Biff driving into the manure. There was no skateboard chase scene. You didn't have Marty. So at the very end, one of the things I noticed too was at the end of the movie, Marty tries to make it back to the Twin Pines Mall so he can prevent the Libyans from shooting Doc, right? What instead happens at the end of the musical is that Marty is still stuck in like downtown Hill Valley. He stays there and he realizes he can't save Doc from the radiation burns. But again, one of the story elements that they did preserve was the letter that he wrote to Doc saying, hey, you know, you're going to get burned by, you know, radiation. Please take the necessary precautions. Doc rips it up, throws it away. But of course, he gets it, pieces it back together again. And he meets Marty in downtown Hill Valley instead, right? And surprises Marty that way with the DeLorean. So that was pretty cool. Then, of course, they break out in song, and it's, you know, so a lot of story elements had to be changed a little bit, I think because of the pacing and also to make it more compatible with the musical. So there was some differences here and there. I was okay with it. I was kind of expecting some differences in the storyline. I didn't know it would be as drastic as removing things like Einstein. I thought that was sort of a, you know, kind of a loss in some way. I don't think that was a win. They could have had a guy in a suit like they did with the stunt driver for the original Back to the Future scene at the Twin Pines Mall, where they used a guy in a dog suit. I thought that would have been a very great kind of callback to that. You know, Bob Gale could have made that call, and a lot of us would have seen that and been like, oh man, that's great. You got the guy in the dog suit playing Einstein. That would have been cool. Unfortunately, they just didn't go there. So it is what it is. Maybe because of the logistics, and maybe would have taken away from the Marty Doc storyline, which I think in the musical felt a little bit more prominent. Like the relationship between Marty and Doc, they brought that up a few notches, right? Now in the movie there was that, but there was also the relationship between Marty and like his parents, right? And Marty and you know, his dad. So that was also there, but I felt like the relationship between Marty and Doc, they brought that up a few notches. So I think the removal of Einstein was really to sort of support that, right? At least that's what it felt like, because they kept going to that relationship, the whole relationship between Marty and Doc. And remember when at the end of the movie, you know, you kind of feel that 1955 Doc was going to miss Marty. Like Marty made a big impact on his life. That was sort of a much bigger theme in the musical. I felt like that was more focused on, more concentrated on in the musical than it was in the movie. Not that it was absent from the movie, but they brought that up a few notches. Okay. Another cool difference that I thought was interesting, when Marty goes back to 1955 and meets 1955 Doc for the first time. You remember he showed up at the house, and Doc had that mind control or mind reading device on his head. So they reversed the perspective of that scene, which I thought was very interesting. So instead of Marty being on the outside and you see, Doc, opening up the door, it's the other way around. It's Doc inside of his garage, and Marty's on the on the outside looking in from the. So I thought that was kind of cool. They reversed that whole scene, the perspective of that scene. So that was kind of interesting. A couple other updates to Back to the Future that I thought were interesting and definitely noteworthy to talk about. So remember the Darth Vader scene where Marty visits his dad and George, and he plays the Eddie Van Halen on the Walkman, and he's dressed up in his radiation suit, and I am Darth Vader, right, from the planet Vulcan. So there's that Star Wars reference in the movie. That was completely absent from the musical, but instead of that, they did have a Star Wars reference, and I'm going to spoil it for you. There is a fight scene between Marty and Biff in the musical, and Marty and Biff, they get on top of a car, and Marty busts out a lightsaber. And it's a red lightsaber, right? Like Darth Vader uses a red lightsaber. And he busts out the lightsaber, and he says, "Biff, I am your father," and all that kind of stuff. So they did sort of a throwback to their throwback to Star Wars in this one, but they did a completely different one. It's between Marty and Biff. I thought that was pretty interesting. So he busts out like this really cool NeoPixel lightsaber, and I think Biff actually disarms him or something. So it was kind of an interesting thing there. Another little joke that they made for the in the musical was a Back to the Future 4 joke, right? So Bob Gale is very anti Back to the Future 4. They don't want to do a remake, but they did mention that in the musical. And what they did was, how they did that was, it was going to be one of George's novels that he wrote, Back to the Future 4, right? So a sci-fi novel. And he said something about, maybe Hollywood will make a movie adaptation, and they'll probably mess it up. So they had a little bit of a joke about that one in the musical. I thought that was pretty cool. Let's see here. So the Back to the Future joke. The other joke that they made fun of was going to 2020. That was a pretty good one. So obviously in the movie, which was made and released in '85, you don't have any of that, right? But yeah, that was kind of a cool little joke to make fun of 2020. So Doc Brown has a dream in the musical, right? And it's a musical scene, and it's really a bunch of people dancing, and they're wearing the mind reading device that Doc Brown invented, and he's singing about going to the future and all this kind of stuff. So he tells Marty that he had a dream that he went to 2020, or maybe maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he did go to 2020, and he came back and he told Marty about what happens in 2020. That there's no wars and no diseases and everything is perfect. So that was a pretty funny thing that made the audience laugh, right? Because we all know better. But I thought that was kind of cool, because you got to remember when the movie was released, in '85, you go to 2015. In 2015, that was like almost 10. That was like 10 years ago, right? So I mean, we don't have flying cars, we don't have all this kind of stuff, right? That like they did in 2015 in the movie. So that was kind of a funny little joke talking about 2020. Right, when we all know better. So that was definitely Bob Gale for sure that kind of came up with that. No Old Man Peabody or the Pines in the musical. So he crashes. I want to say he crashes into Doc Brown's. He crashes into something. It looked like a garage. It was somewhere else, but there was no Old Man Peabody. There was no Twin Pines. They show the Twin Pines Mall, but there's no like Twin Pines, Lone Pine kind of thing, right? They don't really have that element is missing from the musical. There were less characters in some ways. For example, Biff's gang, I think there was like 3 or 4 guys, but there was only 2 in this one. They kept the guy, I don't remember his name, the guy with the 3D glasses. Also, Marvin Berry and the Starlighters. There's only 2 of them in the band, as opposed to, I think there was like 4 or 5 band players in that one. 5 if you include Marty, right? So they kind of scaled that down, and that's probably okay. One of the things I thought was really cool, and they gave him a much bigger spotlight, was Mayor Goldie Wilson. So Goldie Wilson got a much bigger spotlight in the musical. I thought it was pretty cool. And the guy and he had a singing part, right? So when you first meet him in the diner, right? Goldie, it's a whole musical number, and he comes out and he's singing, and it's great, right? He does a really, really great job. So he gets to sing as well when he becomes a mayor. So they really kind of brought Goldie Wilson to the forefront as well. Jennifer, they kind of, I think she had kind of similar presence as what she had in the movie. Not super big. I thought Goldie, they brought him up a bit more. So that was pretty cool. So I'm pretty sure Dawn Full of Love was pretty happy about that. I felt like it was a little underused in the original movie. It's more of a very kind of a side character, just to point out, hey, he's going to become mayor, right? All that kind of stuff. So, what else? Let's see here. Yeah, so those are the main. There's probably a lot of other differences out there, but those are the ones that I felt were more like noteworthy, right? The differences in the story elements and the DeLorean elements, that kind of stuff. So, what did I think of Back to the Future musical? I thought it was great, and I think there were a couple scenes here which could have been improved, but overall it was amazing. It was an amazing endeavor, right? An amazing endeavor. Now, if you're a hardcore Back to the Future movie fan, I don't know like how well you're going to receive the differences. I thought it was fine. They didn't make the differences enough to where it changed the entire story, right? And what they were trying to convey through the story. Like you can set your mind to anything. You can do anything that you set out to accomplish. That's really the kind of the core, and they really drove that home with Doc inventing time travel. If you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. The future is not carved in stone. George McFly, he really wanted to write sci-fi novels. He was able to do that. Well, they didn't downplay that, but I felt like they sort of brought the whole Doc Brown inventing time machine, time travel, and bringing that to the forefront. So that still continued on. They were able to deliver on that story element. So let me know what you guys think. If you've seen the musical, I haven't really read any reviews or anything. I might do that. I've just been rather busy. I want to know what folks thought, right, about the story changes, and if it worked for you and if it didn't work for you. It worked for me. I was okay with that. With the absence of Einstein, that's the only exception there. I felt like they could have brought Einstein in there. I thought that would have been great. And as a guy in his suit, that would have been like icing on the cake. I feel like that was a very big missed opportunity for the fans, giving the fans a nod because we know about the guy in the dog suit. That would have been amazing, but they just didn't go there. So, but everything else was amazing. The DeLorean, I can't talk enough about how cool that prop replica is. It was very cool. I thought they did a really great job. I don't know whose time circuits those are, but those are legit like aftermarket or custom time circuits. But again, they did a great job on the DeLorean. Again, it's painted, LEDs all over the place. The hover mode at the end, that just that blew your mind. And I think that because of that, right, and the DeLorean was always a big star. In fact, arguably the star of the movie, right? Even there was an interview back in the 80s after the movie came out, or maybe it was just before, Michael J. Fox, where the interviewer asked Michael J. Fox, like, hey, isn't the DeLorean the star of the show? And Michael J. Fox was like, wait a minute. You know what? The DeLorean really, at least for me, the DeLorean is in fact the star, the biggest star of Back to the Future. And the reason why I say that, I think the main reason why I say that, not just because of DeLorean, right? It's very cool. Is because I remember when I was a kid and seeing the commercial for Back to the Future. I haven't seen the movie yet. The one thing that I focused on was the DeLorean, was the car, was the time car. And I remember saying, Dad, look at that car, look how cool it is. I didn't really, I care too much that it was a movie trailer. Back then when you're a kid, you're looking at stuff and things just kind of pop out and you focus on something, you gravitate towards something. And my dad said, hey, you know what? That's a real car that you can get. And I was like, what? We got to get it. I couldn't believe how cool that car was, right? Instantly became my favorite car. And I was always a big car guy with my dad. Fortunately, my dad is still with us. So we still talk about those days of where I begged him to buy a DeLorean. And I remember looking at, it's funny because the LA Times, they just did an article on the Segerstrom. I remember looking in the LA Times when my dad was a big LA Times guy. He'd always pick up the paper and I'd bust out the classifieds. So my thing was looking at the classifieds for DeLoreans and looking at the funnies, the comics. And I would I pull out the classifieds and see what DeLoreans were for sale. And I remember going through and looking at, and this was probably in about 85, looking at DeLoreans, listings for DeLoreans. I would see a lot of 81s. I don't remember seeing 82, 83. It's a lot of 81s for sale. And they're about 21,000 is where you would see the pricing, this being back in 85. And every week, every day actually, it was a daily paper. I'd bust those out and see those listings there. I'm like, Dad, please, let's buy a car. Look, it's really close. It's only 21,000. And back in that day, 21,000 was a lot of money for a car, right? So I remember my parents, we moved to the house we were living in at that time back in 82, and they paid like 130,000 for that house. So 21,000 was a lot of money. And I remember they stretched themselves to buy that house. They had like 3 mortgages on it. It was ridiculous. So here I am begging my dad to buy a DeLorean for $21,000. As a kid, you just don't know, right? Of course, he never bought the car, so it was kind of on me to get my own eventually. So obviously I did that, and here we are today. We're doing live streams and talking about prop replica DeLoreans and the Back to the Future musical, which, nobody ever contemplated that this movie would become a musical and you would have this really cool prop replica of the DeLorean time machine that I was very impressed with it. I think in concluding our discussion about the prop replica of this, they need to I don't know, maybe they can make some Back to the Future musical merch, maybe a model that Russ can add to his collection. So Russ here in the chat is saying that the musical was awesome. Story changes were necessary and didn't detract from the fun. Awesome. Everyone needs to go see it. I would agree. I felt like, for me, Einstein, I'm an animal person. It is what it is. I've got my own dog. Einstein was one of my favorite parts. Copernicus was one of my favorite parts in the movie. And actually thinking about it, if you had gone back in time, you could have had, the guy in the suit play Copernicus too. And just a different shade. I think Copernicus was like a lighter colored dog than Einie. But other than that, I think the story elements were fine as well. Everybody does need to go out and see this thing. If you're a DeLorean fan, you're going to love it, right? One of the things I did notice too so I'm looking at here is that the headlights, right? The headlights are the proper kind of yellowish headlights. Maybe they're a little too yellow, but as a spectacle, you need to overemphasize things so that you can convey what this thing is supposed to look like so that the audience gets it, right? You need to convey these things to the audience. So yeah, and if they used like a 6,000 K color temperature on the headlights, that's not accurate, right? So they probably used 3,000 K, that's what I'm thinking. These are more like 3,500 to 4,000 K color temperature on the headlights. But in the musical, they were more of a yellowish color, which I think was appropriate. Because at the time, in the 80s, that was the color temperature of headlights. Because they were all, incandescent, no LED, that kind of stuff back then. So they had that. They had sort of a blue color to the flux bands, I think, which is fine because it comes out that way in the movie, even though they are white lights, right? When they filmed it, the color temperature was tweaked a little bit on the film itself so that it came out as blue, which I think looks pretty cool. That's why when you see Time Machine replicas, they've got the blue lighting behind the flux bands. Unless you're Edwin, you've got both. You've got the white, you've got the blue, and then you can kind of bring them both together to create a cool sort of cyan blue color to it. Very cool. There's lots of different ways to interpret and to sort of replicate the look of the movie, or you can replicate the look of what the car would look like with the naked eye, right? But anyway, Russ is also saying that the soundtrack CD is awesome too. So the other thing we could talk about for Back to the Future musical is the music, right? The songs that they so they had a lot of new songs, right? A lot of new, and they're really well done. They had a composer in the pit, I guess you can call it, but I didn't see an orchestra. So Russ, if you're tuning in, did they have a live orchestra when you saw it? They didn't appear to have one, but they had a conductor, not a composer, a conductor, right? Conducting, he was doing this, right? I'm not a big, music orchestra guy. My son is, but I'm not. But he was, he was conducting and he was flipping pages, music pages. So I felt like maybe they were there under the stage, or I don't know. But honestly, normally there's a live orchestra. So he's saying yes, there was a live orchestra. I think maybe they sort of either they were under the floor or they just had pre-recorded stuff. I don't know. It sounded great though. They did have live performances of the Huey Lewis and the News songs like Out of Time and Power of Love. They had those two. They had I believe Earth Angel was played as well, and Johnny Be Good. So they did those as well. I think they did maybe a couple other ones as well, but I was really waiting to see what they were going to do with that, because those are obviously songs that they're copyrighted by other artists, Huey Lewis, right? So they probably got some licensing going on there as well. But they did proper to those. I thought that was a very great touch. I would have felt like something was missing had they not have done those songs in the musical. I'm glad they brought those songs out. There really wasn't anything that I can remember that is missing as far as the 80s music that they played, and some of the classics from 1955 that they played as well, like Johnny Be Good and Earth Angel, right? So Marvin Berry and the Starlighters, they were there singing their signature songs. Marty saying Johnny Be Good, so that was pretty cool. He did a really good job there. I was very impressed. So I think that wraps it up as far as the DeLorean Time Machine. Again, highly recommend the musical. Go out and see it. The whole experience that I had obviously is a little different, but I wouldn't have traded that for the world. That was an amazing event, amazing night. Displaying the DeLoreans, meeting all the fans, talking to all the fans, showing off the TOMY to everybody. It was great. Doing the comparison was very cool. Speaking of the TOMY, we're going to segue into our next and sort of final discussion here about the TOMY, about the 1/10 scale model. And Russ, did you get it yet? I haven't checked the tracking. I've been so busy. It might still be in flight to the UK, so hopefully you'll get that soon. Hopefully it arrives okay. I was a little nervous, but I did tell the guy, hey, please be careful with this, So anyway, he's saying at the Adelphi, you can see the orchestra below the front of the stage. Yeah, so at the Segerstrom, they had some floor thing there. You can see the conductor just fine, but you couldn't see anyone else. So I honestly, I just don't know. Maybe someone else there. Russ is saying he hasn't gotten his TOMY yet. So we sent Russ the TOMY, I think it was early last week, and it's still on its way to the UK. So hopefully it will get there soon in unscathed, that he can do his unboxing. So Russ, you're gonna do us one on this. Do an unboxing video if you can. I want to see it. And I'd like to see it in your collection room, your DeLorean model collection room. That'd be kind of cool. If not, no worries. We'll wait for your photos and your official review. Hopefully yours is okay. There was a friend of ours at the event. Rob Rogers is a good friend of ours. He builds prop replicas, kind of like the Futaba remote. He does a lot of electronics. He was also at the event as well. In fact, he was helping us out with the Tomy versus DeLorean time machine comparison that we did as well. He got his Tomy, and apparently one of the tail lights isn't working. So I've also heard some other issues with other folks saying that they had some issues with some of the maybe the LEDs, and that's really kind of it. So you have the LEDs, and then you have the fog, the fog effect, the fog machine, whatever's in there, right? The little mini fog machine that's inside the car. Those are the two things that could fail, I guess. Everything else, is pretty static, right? And you're not really putting things together. But he did point that out. So I don't know how well Tomy is when it comes to like customer support. If you do end up with a model that has some issues with it, right? But if you do and you got something wrong with it, I would reach out to them. They were easy to work with when I did the live stream last year. He's gonna do one. So Russ is gonna do an unboxing. He's gonna do a short. All right, or a reel. Perfect. Yes, please do one and post it. Tomy is replacing mine. So Comerica Industries is in the chat here, and he's saying that Tomy's going to replace it. One of the flux band lights don't work. So that's going to happen. That's going to happen. He also asked, was the score from the movie in it? Yes, you had a lot of the Back to the Future score that was in the movie. And again, some of the songs that they played from the 80s and also the 50s music was still there as well in the show. So that was definitely appreciated. So he hasn't received his. It's probably in customs. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that. But look at how crazy the pricing on these things are. Now, the 110 Tomy is out of stock. You can't buy it from Tomy or Kickstarter, right? So it sold out pretty quick. You weren't able to get it. I don't remember, Rusty, if you remember when it sold out, at what point it sold out and you couldn't back it or you couldn't order it anymore. I can't remember. I remember like sometime in like September of last year is when they charged my credit card I ordered two, one for, to play with. I brought it to the Segerstrom the other night and played with it there and let others play with it. Then I got one that's sealed in the box that, it's going to remain sealed forever, that kind of thing, just to have it there. That was a kind of a cool thing because Tomy offered a 2-pack. Like you can buy 2 of them and it's cheaper than if you were to buy them, like, say, individually, right? So at the time when you backed it, it was $2.99 early bird pricing. And you could order that one, $2.99. The shipping was probably like, I think it was $30 or something like that to have it shipped. Again, this is all U.S. only, no international, right? So he's saying it was 3 days after it went live on Kickstarter, it sold out. So you were not able to get this thing. You are not able to buy this thing from Tomy today. And by all accounts, they are not re-releasing it. They're not going to do a reissue, okay? Which makes sense. Hot Toys, they didn't reissue the Mark 1, okay? They didn't need to. They reissued it in another way, right? The Mark 2. So, now Tomy did comment on that. And Russ, maybe you remember. They were going to try to make the Mark 2 Tomy 110 scale model stand on its own. So when you look at this against the Mark 1, the Mark 2 is going to be very, very different, very, very Mark 2 specific, right? It's not going to be a Mark 1 that they just kind of modified a little bit, slap some stuff on it. Here you go. Now, I like the Mark 2. Between the Mark 1 and the Mark 2, I like the Mark 2 better than the Mark 1. They made one significant correction on the Hot Toys. They fixed the fascias. Okay? This shouldn't have been wrong to begin with, though. Come on. Anyway, they fixed the fascias, but everything else was pretty much, the same. And I was just like, it wasn't different enough. So, obviously, I've talked about that to no end, right? You guys are probably sick and tired of hearing me say, oh, yeah, it's the same thing over and over again. But it was what it was. Tomy, my point is that Tomy has made it a point to say they are not going to do that. The Mark II is going to be legit, right? It's going to stand on its own, right? It is not going to be a recycled Mark I that is clearly just something that they modified, right? And it's funny because following Hot Toys progress on the Mark II, Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con, that is where they first unveiled the Mark I. Then I think the following year, they had on display a Mark II that was really just a Mark I that they just modified, right? They just modified it. And basically that's what they released, was just a modified Mark I, in my opinion. Some of you guys may differ on that. I get it, right? I haven't gotten my Mark III yet. I'm not surprised because I'm usually the critical reviewer on theirs. Others have gotten it. I ordered mine from Sideshow, my DeLorean Mark III 1/6 scale. Haven't gotten it. I don't know if Sideshow is shipping, but I know others like Denobi have gotten theirs. I feel like they ordered from Hot Toys Hong Kong and had it fast-tracked, which makes sense if you want to get those in hand and do your unboxing video. And Denobi's 1/6 scale Mark III review was largely very positive, which I'm not surprised. He's really into those, right? So he's sort of overlooking a lot of the stuff that I'm going to focus on like crazy when I do my unboxing. So I'm not going to point out, I'm not going to, dwell on what they did right. I'm going to dwell on what they did not do right. And I've already done that, right? I've already pointed that out in a couple other videos on, as far as what they did not get right. I'm very particular when it comes to the DeLorean, including the Back to the Future DeLoreans from the movies. And if I'm paying $1,000 for a model, that better be screen accurate. That better be screen accurate. And, by all accounts, it isn't. Okay? At least not in the way you would expect it to. Now, there's going to be little things that are not accurate. You can kind of overlook that. But the tires and wheels and the hood box are the two big items that have to be right. Okay? And when I look at that, I don't see it. It doesn't look proper to me. And maybe that's just me. Others are saying, oh, it looks amazing, looks great. You're just being too picky when it comes to everything. You're very nitpicky. But anyway, back to the Tomy, which I'm just raving about. I love the Tomy. Oh, you can buy it from their store in Japan. Okay. So, Russ, when you say you can buy it from their store in Japan, is that the Tomy? Is that what you're talking about? Or is this the Hot Toys? Anyway, getting back to the Tomy. What I want to do here is, and let's see if I can do an advanced search on this one. I want to include completed and sold items. So give you guys an idea of how much this thing is actually selling for. So you can buy the Takara Tomy, right? Which from Japan, and I don't know if that's the Tomy store. Okay, so you can buy the and how much are they asking for it, Russ? Or maybe you can post a link in the chat and we can kind of just go to it and take a look at it. But I wanted to focus on how much the Tomy 1/10 scale DeLorean is selling for, because I've been getting a lot of messages from folks who want to buy it from me, because I posted that video of me shipping the Tomys to Europe. Now, I didn't buy those. I had those shipped to me from folks in Europe and countries in Europe who purchased it and had it shipped to me, right, as a favor to friends. I consider friends, like Russ is a friend of mine, okay? So, of course, I'm going to do it for him, right? And but I don't sell them, right? I don't carry those. I bought two, that's all. And I paid full price, okay? $2.99 a piece. I thought two was cool because you save some money if you buy two. And they had it as a package deal. So I was like, I'm going to buy two, okay? So, but these are selling for like $500, right? Here's a buy it now for a sealed one that just sold yesterday for $500, $500. Same seller 3 times here, $580. Here's one that sold for $625. Quite a few, right? $699, $650. Okay, so they're, I would say somewhere between $500 to, this one sold on November 8th. That was a long time ago, for $800. So that's an outlier. So it's like somewhere between $500 and maybe $7. So this one sold December 26th for $700, or best offer, so maybe lower, right? Another best offer. Maybe they bought it they did the buy it now. I don't really know. I can't really tell. Usually when it's a best offer, they have this lined out and it says like best offer accepted, I think. That's what I recall. I buy a lot of stuff on eBay, mainly the Hot Wheels stuff is what I buy. So Russ is saying you can actually buy it from the Tomy store in Japan. So Russ, is that Tomy.com or TomyToys.com? Maybe you can get us the link. I'm curious. Prices of these was always going to go up. Yes, we knew that was going to happen. You got a lot of people that threw them up for auction. You got this one at $540 right now. So a bit, almost twice. Now 500 again. These sold for $299. If you were a backer, $299. I think retail they were saying $300 or $399 retail. So now they're selling for almost twice how much they originally sold for. They have flooded eBay. And it's kind of interesting. You got Tomy 110 scale replica, Back to the Future DeLorean Time Machine, $704.99, right? And $488. Whoa, that one's pretty good. That one sold for a bit less. $488. That's the lowest. $659, $650, $625, $399, $35. So these are obviously not Tomys. These are the smaller scale. Let's take a look at what's currently up for sale right now and how much you can expect to purchase one for. $750, buy it now. $650, buy it now. So if you were, let's take a look at, let's sort this. We'll go shipping lowest first. Price plus shipping lowest first. So obviously you're going to get the auctions. So you can buy it now. $625 is the cheapest you can get it for. So you can buy it somehow on the Tomy site for $535. That's about $135 more than retail. So it's not too bad. But then you've got the shipping you have to contend with. That's not going to be cheap, I would imagine. And we don't know where these things are going to go. If they're going to go up, if they're going to go down. Look at the Hot Toys, the 1/6 scale. That shot up to $3,500, right? Then it just sank once the Mark II came out. It sank. Now it's sitting around $1,200, maybe $1,400, $1,300, $1,500, something like that, right? Sealed ones, which they're still out there. And so if you held on to one and didn't sell it when it was $3,500, and you were trying to make some money off that, you kind of lost your chance. That will never go back to those prices again. Not with the Mark II and the Mark III out. Because again, Mark II and the Mark III is basically a Mark I. Now this one, I don't know if it will go up. Same thing may happen. The Mark II of this may come out, and you may see these prices go back down like $400, right? Which is what they retail for. But look how many are on here. There's a lot. There was quite a few. That's the scoop on the Tomy 110 scale, and they're crushing it. So again, you've seen all my videos. You know how pleased I am with this. We did a full unboxing video. We did a comparison between that and the DeLorean 1/1 scale time machine replica. And a lot of guys out there are like, well, wait a minute, that time machine's not screen accurate. Well, the DeLorean aspects of it are not. Right, I get that. He used a black interior, automatic, with a gas lap hood and the darker wheels as his base for the time machine. But Edwin's time machine is very accurate. He took a few liberties here and there. He kind of did his own thing here and there, but it's very accurate. He even got the flux band colors correct as far as the lighting goes, right? He took it that far. He went so far as to convert the automatic shifter to a manual shifter knob, right? So he did that. And but the whole video that we did was really to sort of compare between the Back to the Future effects, the prop replica stuff of that car versus what Tomy did, and they did a pretty good job. And I remember when they were talking about the product, they did their work. I think they looked at the A car from the Peterson Museum to make sure they were getting it as screen accurate as possible. Alright, so Takara Tomy unveils the 110 scale DeLorean time machine model from Back to the Future. Available only through Takara Tomy Mall. We just went there. Ships in December. And approximately $535. So if you go to the Takara Tomy Mall, I guess you can order it from that, but I can't get you a link to that. First paragraph mentions the price. Yeah, in yen. It's $535 US, and that's 76,780 Japanese yen. So on the Takara Tomy Mall, but there's no link to the mall. Yep, it is gone. So I don't think you can order it. If it changes, if we figure it out, go into the mall and try to find it there, Takara Tomy Mall. We'll post a link, direct link to it. And Russ, thanks for sending that over to us. And this was an August article, so limited release. So it probably sold out. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. For the price point, it's amazing. Can't wait to get their Enterprise refit. Yeah, that's going to be cool. If you can order it direct, it means that more will appear on eBay direct from Japan. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Russ. Appreciate that. All right, everybody. So we're going to wrap this episode of DeLoreanTECH Live up. And actually, you know what? Let's head on over to the auction. Let's see if Mr. Seller here commented. 38. That still blows my mind that this thing sold for 38,000 bucks. Much more expensive than the Tomy, but this is a 1-to-1 scale. And it is. Let's see what we got here. Oh, I disagree. The other car was a tenth of the mileage that this one does. Pound for pound, DeLoreans are going for less than they were a few years ago. I kind of agree with that a little bit. It's really hard. I always mention when we talk about the DeLorean prices that there's really, you can't really say the market is doing this or the market is doing that. These cars, the pricing is all over the place, right? Now, in general, the car market, there's going to be some swings and there's going to be some trends and there's going to be all sorts of stuff. DeLoreans are almost in a class by themselves because it's a car, but it's more than a car to most of the people buying them. It just doesn't, it represents a lot more. It represents style. It represents pop culture. It represents this iconic symbol, right? That it's almost sort of indescribable, the feeling you get when you... I remember the first time I saw a DeLorean, I was blown away. It's not enough to see it, pictures of it. Seeing it in person, it's surreal for the first time. Obviously, you get used to it, but remember the first time I saw the A car, and that was the first DeLorean I ever saw in person. I was completely blown away. I must have sat and gawked at that car for, I don't remember how long, but it was a long time. And I was just like a little kid. And I begged my mom to take pictures of me in front of the DeLorean. And I have those photos still, and I've posted them out there. They're still out there. But man, this car represents so much more than just a car, right? So when we talk about prices for the car, I don't know that you can say, well, the trend is down, so it's unheard of that a DeLorean is going to take more than it did a few years ago. I don't know about that. This year saw 3 records, like 3 record-breaking, and when we say record, we mean the Johnny Carson DeLorean. That was 111,000. 3 cars broke that record this year. Yes, low-mileage cars. Okay, so you have the collector aspect of it as well. Okay? But, again, my philosophy... the higher the mileage, the better the DeLorean, okay? Higher the mileage, the better the DeLorean. There's a lot more to it than that, but the higher mileage cars tell you that the car's been driven, that issues have been worked out, right? Because these cars came over across the pond with a lot of QA/QC issues, hence why they set up the QA/QC centers on the East Coast and the West Coast. And speaking of which, I almost forgot. I met a guy at the Segerstrom the other night when we did the Back to the Future, the musical DeLorean setup outside. He was one of the security guards working for the Segerstrom, used to work for the DeLorean DMC QA/QC Center in Santa Ana. He was one of the guys that worked there. And we were talking up all sorts of stuff about, all the stuff that used to take place back then with the QA/QCs, and he went into detail about how he worked on the cars, and they came over with a lot of issues, right? They set those up to address those issues. The higher mileage cars aren't going to have those issues because, presumably a lot of those issues have been worked out already. Hence, that's why you have a car, like the car I bought made it to 91,000 miles, no issue, right? They poured a lot of money into that car. A lot of that has been forgotten, okay? You got a lot of cars that are maybe 50,000 miles. That's a good thing because that car made it to 50,000 miles, okay? That tells you that whatever issues had existed had been worked out. They've been worked out. A lot of people don't know about that. They see, oh, low mileage car, that means, oh man, it's practically brand new still. Well, you know, you're going to learn the hard way, if that's what you're going for, that you're going to have to do a lot of work that would have had to have been done to make that a car that could get to 91,000 miles. Okay, it's going to cost you a lot of money. Versus just getting that car that's 50,000, 60,000 miles already, you're saving a lot. Okay, you're saving a lot. And now, as far as the market turning, I don't know. It's a DeLorean. It's more than just a car. I feel like, and we've done so many live streams on Bring a Trailer, and we looked at every year that goes by, you see the prices up and down, right? Is there really a predictable market for these things? I just don't think there is. When you hit a recession, that might soften things, but DeLoreans really stand out on their own, right? Again, you're not really just buying a car. You're buying a statement. You're buying history. You're buying an iconic piece of pop culture that really you can't compare any other car to the DeLorean. You cannot. Name a car that you can compare on the same level as a DeLorean. Okay? Name a car. The Lamborghini Countach, it appeared in the Cannonball Run or whatever. What else? Knight Rider, I mean the Pontiac Firebird Trans Am, still not as iconic as the DeLorean, right? It's not as iconic. What else? Even the Audi R8, the Iron Man, the Iron Man car, not as iconic. What else could possibly be as iconic as a DeLorean, as recognizable globally as a DeLorean, right? There is really no car out there that even comes close, right? No car comes close to the DeLorean in terms of the pop culture relevancy, right? And the iconic aura that this car has. Now, talking about the pricing on this, $38,000 is, in my opinion, is a steal for this car. It is ridiculous. Okay, and like I mentioned earlier in the live stream, I remember a car that I looked at, an 81. It was a manual transmission. This is an automatic late VIN 81. He wanted 38. This is back in 2018, and that car was kind of rough too. I mean, it had a cracked windshield, and I was like, okay, well, I'm looking at spending in the 30s. Ultimately, I didn't. I was able to get a really good deal on mine, just under 30. But to see a car today, a DeLorean, drivable car, sell for 38,000, right? Yeah, that's an amazing deal. That's an amazing deal. Now, is this going to be commonplace? No, because this particular car, had some issues with the auction. Okay. And that is what kind of drove this one down. And the seller is nowhere to be seen in the chat or in the comment section here. Unfortunately, he's probably kicking himself. He should have waited it out. He should have waited it out a little bit. Both fascias need to be repainted. And yeah, if that's the worst part of this car, then yeah, that's irrelevant. That's a non-issue to me. Now, did they peak out? They actually peaked out in 2024. I mean, over $150,000 for a basic stock DeLorean. Low miles. That was a 93-mile DeLorean, but low miles. Broke records. Drivable cars with, 50,000, 40,000. Maybe those have gone down a bit. Maybe you're seeing more of those in the 50s and 60s because you see more pop up for sale. Okay, so it's a supply and demand thing as well. If there are more cars available out there, then there is room to negotiate a little bit more. I think you got a little bit more buying power. So it's more of a buyer's market, if you will, right? When there are very few out there, then it becomes a seller's market, right? So it can shift back and forth. But does that mean that the market for DeLoreans is just going down in price? No, I don't think so. I think a supply and demand aspect definitely factors into that. I see a lot of guys flooding the market with DeLoreans. We don't normally have 2 auctions at the same time. Now, you had 2 auctions at the same time. You've got another one right now that ends tomorrow. You don't normally see that on Bring a Trailer. And I would argue that you have that because of the high prices from this year's auctions. 3 that destroyed the original record of 110,000 or 111, the Johnny Carson. And that would be these ones here. You had 113 in October, 111 in September, and then you had, where's that one for 151 in October as well. So you had just recently cars that took well over $100,000, low miles cars, but over $100,000. And that's why you're seeing a lot more people trying to sell, because they think, hey man, I can get a lot more from my DeLorean, so let's just flood the market with the cars. Supply goes up, right? Demand goes down a little bit because you have, more cars now available to the same number of potential buyers. So now you got room to negotiate, and of course the better conditioned cars are the ones that are going to move for better prices, right? And the one that sold today for $38,000, not in the best of shape, but it's a driving car. Still a great deal. All right, guys. So that is where we're going to end it. And we need to do a live about models. Yes, so Russ is saying we need to do a live about models. I would agree with that. So we can work on that, Russ. We'll do a live stream, and I think I mentioned this to Russ. We need to do a live stream on his model collection, or at least a video, right, that kind of showcases the DeLorean model collector's full collection, over 600 individual pieces. So that's something that we can shoot for. Maybe in 2025 we'll do it. We'll pull the trigger on that. Anyway, guys, thanks again for watching DeLoreanTECH Live. I don't know if we're going to do another live stream tomorrow. I may do a quick one just to see where this one ends up. I got the day off tomorrow. It's always great around the end of the year, taking vacation days. Russ is saying definitely on that one, so we're going to do that. Let's plan for that, Russ. And thanks again for watching, everybody. Really appreciate it. Again, go see Back to the Future, the musical. I am plugging that. Go get the TOMY DeLorean. I'm plugging that. These are 2 things that I highly recommend. Okay? I don't know what's going to come up with that Hot Toys, but as far as the TOMY DeLorean, it's a win. Back to the Future, the musical, a total win. And Back to the Future, the musical, I think it's on Broadway now, but the tour is going to be ending, from what I heard. San Diego, which starts after the Orange County, California tour is over on January 5th, that's going to be the last leg of the tour. And after that, it's done. Now, you're going to have to fly to New York, I guess, to go see it on Broadway. And that's kind of where it is right now. How long it's going to be there for, I honestly don't know. I'm just glad it was here, half an hour away, less than half an hour away. Drove the DeLorean, got to display the DeLorean. It was such a great event. If you can get tickets to that event, I wholeheartedly recommend it. It's very cool show. Very cool experience is really what it was. And try to get tickets up close. That's what I can recommend. Have a great new year, everyone, and we'll see you in 2025.